Can you describe sort of the latest humanitarian situation in the Palestinian Territories, especially given the latest flare of violence there?
Well, I mean, I think this is something that's been happening on a regular basis, these flare-ups, these upticks in violence and sort of the indiscriminate nature of a lot of the things that's happened, both rockets going out from Gaza and airstrikes into Gaza. And all it does two things. I think it destroys buildings and infrastructure, kills people, injures people. But at the same time, I think it puts a lot of psychological pressure on a population who's already struggling with 12 years of a blockade. So it's very hard for them to see hope and a future that's there. So it just adds another element or another step into something which is already quite catastrophic.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of injuries that you mentioned, what sort of numbers do you have?
Well, the numbers, I mean, the recorded numbers we have right now is 29, but they're probably 31, but 29 is the number we're officially using at this point in time, with 200 people injured inside Gaza. Outside Gaza, there's 4 Israeli civilians and around 200 people injured, and that's as well. I don't know what type of injuries there are. One can only just speculate there are injuries because of airstrikes or rocket attacks.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of sort of overall for the last year, the kind of the situation with the blockade, what's been the biggest challenges for you there?
Well, I think the biggest challenges are a full range of things. It's getting goods in. It's having the Kerem Shalom crossing point has been kept open as much as possible by the Israelis. The fuel is going in for the power plants. Electricity since October last year has been going 12 hours a day. It used to be 12. It used to be 4 hours a day as well. So that's very helpful for schools and for hospitals and for people's general lives. That's one thing. I think it's also just the general uncertainty of things. Moving around in Gaza is not easy because the de facto authorities can be quite restrictive to that. We've also got national staff who are working in Gaza and they're not being given permits to come out of Gaza, so they're trapped inside, as it were. The movement of goods and people is not easy, and the funding crisis we have for medical supplies, the funding we supply for food, is one of the biggest concerns we have right now. We're only 13% funded of an appeal that went out in January this year.
Mm-hmm. And we've been hearing reports over the past few months of when those protests happened, the March protests happened, people like journalists and healthcare workers, they've been killed. How can you describe just the dangers for you guys to be?
Well, I mean, what you've got is you've got a fence where people go on a Friday, and you've got large crowds that come together in 5 vantage points, and in that you've got the Palestinian Red Crescent and other volunteers, medical paramedics who are working there. And there's a lot of people get injured with tear gas canisters, people get injured with rubber bullets, people getting shot and wounded, and it's their job then to go into those areas which are quite volatile and quite difficult and dangerous. They have markings to say they're health workers or press at the Geneva, but they don't have flak jackets, they don't have the ability to prevent tear gas inhalation as well. So that's the conditions they have to work in, and it's every Friday, and it's incredibly brave of the journalists and the health workers. There's been 4 health workers killed in the line of duty doing that work on a weekly basis.
Mm-hmm. And what about the situation in the West Bank? How you mentioned that it's deteriorating. What sort of can you describe?
Well, I mean, in the West Bank, what you've got is it's obviously a less humanitarian acute crisis than it is in Gaza, but what you've got is a very coercive environment. It's a kind of a pervasiveness there that goes on, things like the expansion of settlements, the number of units that have been approved and planned for is just sending messages out that more and more of this land has been taken. I think also what you have is, the settler violence associated with that has been increasing. We've noted that since the start of the year there's been an uptick in that violence. I think in places like Hebron, where it's quite a constrained area, that has been it's a very much a flashpoint, as places like Nablus as well. And there's been an awful lot of lone wolf attacks. There's been a lot of increased general violence throughout those. The possibilities of us working in those areas becomes more and more problematic. The Israeli authorities are not always so eager for us to work in Area C, dealing with the Bedouin villages, dealing with these vulnerable communities who rely on us for international assistance because they've no other means to do that.